Hello, I'm Deb Bowden of Franklin Covey. Welcome to Powerful Time Management Skills, where I'll be covering the tactical basics for more effective planning. The end in mind is to help you increase your productivity by applying what you learn. This presentation is divided into 5 sections or topics: foundational principles, keys to using your planning tool, planning basics, weekly planning, and daily planning. A great place to start is with a definition of what planning actually is. For our purposes, let's say that planning is predetermining a course of events in writing. So, thinking through the day while you're in the shower doesn't count. You need to write it down. Notice also that word predetermining. This is not a synonym for guaranteeing. Your day, week, and life may not go exactly according to your written plan. But with a plan as your roadmap, you're guaranteed to more quickly recover from unexpected detours, and you're far more likely than the person without a plan to arrive at your final destination. Sadly, though, most people don't plan daily. The University of Chicago conducted a study in which they polled 4,000 working executives, asking them if they predetermined each day's course of events in writing. Just 3% said they did. As for the other 97%, well, you can conduct your own poll. You'll likely hear the same responses. The top 3 reasons for not planning were: 1. Planning limits my freedom. 2. I'm too busy firefighting. And 3, my favorite, I don't have time. Let's consider that last and most popular excuse for just a moment. Think of the most successful person you know. How many hours does he or she have in a day? 24. How about someone who's really struggling? How many hours does that person have? 24 again. And everyone in between? 24. You get the idea. You see, it's not the amount of time we have that determines our success. That's fixed. Rather, it's how we choose to use that time. Every day we're faced with a variety of situations in which we're required to make choices about how we use our time. For years, we at Franklin Covey have been using a tool called the Time Matrix. It's a square divided into 4 sections or quadrants that represents how we choose to spend our time. Quadrant 1 is called the quadrant of necessity and involves things that are both urgent and important. Quadrant 2 is called the quadrant of leadership. It involves things that are important but not urgent. Quadrant 3 involves things that are urgent but not important. It's called the quadrant of deception. And Quadrant 4, the quadrant of default or waste, involves things that are neither urgent nor important. Let me give you some examples. Quadrant 1 activities are important things that have to be done right now. They could be anything from handling a crisis to meeting a critical deadline to getting to an important appointment on time. Quadrant 2 activities are all the important things you tend to push off, simply because they never become urgent. Planning, preparation, prevention, education, exercise, and career development are all Quadrant 2 activities. Quadrant 3 activities are things that seem like they have to be done right now, but really aren't important. Common Quadrant 3 activities include listening to the latest office gossip, attending unnecessary meetings, ever do that, and trying to satisfy other people's urgent issues. Finally, Quadrant 4 activities are things that have no urgency, nor do they even have to be done. Lying on the couch watching a TV show you're not interested in, or surfing the web while you procrastinate a report that's due are both good examples. So, where do you think you choose to spend more of your time? On urgent things or on important things? Ideally, we should spend all of our time in quadrants 1 and 2 on things that are important and urgent, or important but not urgent. Notice the constant? Important. Of these 2 quadrants, we should work towards spending most of our time in Quadrant 2 on things that are important but not urgent. The wonderful effect of spending time in Quadrant 2 is that you'll have fewer Quadrant 1 activities. Also, if you invest more time in Quadrant 2, you'll be less susceptible to spending time on things that aren't important, Quadrants 3 and 4, because you'll better recognize the things that matter most. The key is to understand the difference between urgent and important. In simple terms, urgent means now, and important means worth doing. The problem for many of us is we unwittingly join the two terms at the hip. Case in point, someone asks you to do a report and tells you it's urgent. Have you ever thought to yourself, ooh, urgent, this must be important? Or how about the opposite? Someone asks you to do something very important and you think, ooh, important, I'd better do this right away. While the association between urgent and important is sometimes valid, it isn't always the case. Let's wrap up this section with some questions and answers from the book First Things First.
Among all the urgent and important things that face us, how do we know what to do?
This is the dilemma that fills our lives. It's what leads us to feel we need to hunker down and do more, faster. But almost always there is one thing among all the others that should be done first. In a sense, there is a quadrant 1 of quadrant 1, or a quadrant 2 of quadrant 2.
Is it bad to be in quadrant 1?
No, it's not. In fact, many people will spend a significant amount of their time in quadrant 1. The key issue is why you're there. Are you in quadrant 1 based on urgency or importance? If urgency dominates when importance faces you, you'll slip into quadrant 3. It's the urgency addiction. But if you're in quadrant 1 because of importance, when urgency faces you, you'll move to quadrant 2. Both quadrant 1 and quadrant 2 describe what's important. It's only the time factor that changes. The real problem is when you're spending time in quadrants 3 and 4.
Where am I going to get the time to spend in quadrant 2?
If you're looking for time to spend in quadrant 2, quadrant 3 is the primary place to get it. Time spent in quadrant 1 is both urgent and important. We already know we need to be there. And we know we shouldn't be in quadrant 4. But quadrant 3 can fool us. The key is learning to see all of our activities in terms of their importance. Then we're able to reclaim time lost to the deception of urgency and spend it in quadrant 2.
I work in a quadrant 1 environment. What do you do then?
Some professions are, by nature, almost completely in quadrant 1. For example, it's the job of firefighters, many doctors and nurses, police officers, news reporters, and editors to respond to the urgent and important. For these people, it's even more critical to capture quadrant 2 time for the simple reason that it builds their capacity to handle quadrant 1. Time spent in quadrant 2 increases our capacity to do.
It seems to me that everything in quadrant 1 demands my attention to be done right now. Is there anything that doesn't?
Some things are crises or problems in the making if we don't attend to them. We can choose to make these things urgent. In addition, what may be a quadrant 2 activity to an organization, such as long-term vision, planning, and relationship building, may be quadrant 1 to its top executive. This is his or her unique charge. The need for these things is great, and the consequences of either doing these things or not doing them are significant. The need for that executive is now. It's urgent, and it must be acted on. The value of the time matrix is that it helps us see how importance and urgency affect the choices we make about how we spend our time, and in the case of this program, underscore the need for planning. So why should we choose to plan? Results. Planning not only enhances our day-to-day effectiveness, but when done properly, actually increases your sense of control or sense of inner peace. You have more focus, more power, and you get more of the most important things done. Using planning tools most effectively is the next step.